I would love for you to share a bit about, in a nutshell, what drew you to law school in the first place, and really, and then what your legal career looked like.
Yeah, great question. What drew me to the law? Besides my parents and other family members telling me that I would be really good at it. And I think so there was maybe some familial pressure that way, but as someone who was always analytic and intellectual as a kid, and that got reinforced, right? I think for a lot of us who are analytic and we do well in school and we have academic achievements, it kind of that gets reinforced, which is a positive thing. But we also, it becomes part of our identity. And maybe we don't explore or think about pursuing other paths that might really mesh with our other interests, right? So I was a very good rational, analytic thinker, and law school felt like a really good fit in that regard. And I think, for a lot of folks who are lawyers and who have, anxiety or are really quick thinkers, um, it's we owe our professional success to a lot of that. But also emotionally, it doesn't really get us necessarily where we want to go. And I was also really interested in psychology. And when I was practicing law or when I was clerking for a judge, like the dynamics within chambers were really interesting to me. And the psychology that was like underlying a fact pattern, I found myself much more engaged with that. And so I ended up practicing several different types of law. Like I worked in big law at a firm in New York City for a while. And then I ultimately did some human rights law. And I loved hearing people's stories. And it just seemed like like a natural transition for me to become a psychotherapist. And I love working with lawyers because I can absolutely relate to maybe how our mind works and the emphasis on rational thinking. And a lot of lawyers, I think, try to ascribe like a rational basis to their feelings. And if our feelings aren't rational, then we tend to dismiss them or avoid them or criticize ourselves for having them in the first place. And I love helping lawyers navigate that.
What was your relationship with stress and just with your nervous system in general, to the extent you were aware of that while you were practicing?
I mean, I think it was, like talking to a fish about water. Like it was just, in a state of chronic activation. Like if we're talking about our nervous systems, there are like three main states your nervous system can be in. And I think, when we're feeling calm, that's what we call being in ventral. When we're a bit activated or stressed, that's a state of sympathetic arousal. Your nervous system's kicking into fight or flight a little bit. Your heart's beating a little faster. Your thoughts are racing. There's some cortisol or adrenaline that starts coursing through our system. And that's just constant. And for a lot of us, like that's somewhat exciting. Like I loved being in my 20s, I loved being a lawyer in New York City. And it felt like a really harmonious relationship, right? With like the pace of the city and the pace of my thoughts. And then ultimately realizing that not only was it unsustainable, but then I was, developing some what we call like unhelpful coping strategies. And I realized that moving that quickly and working all the time for me, and I think for a lot of folks, was in some ways its own coping strategy, right? Like a way of avoiding some uncomfortable emotions. And so that was, it took me a while to realize that and to get comfortable slowing down and realizing that that's not how I wanted to live my life necessarily. That said, it doesn't mean working on anxiety and stress doesn't at all mean we need to stop being high achieving, high functioning professionals. It's more about, can we turn the dial down when we want to so that we can go home and, be present in our lives and have more control over where our nervous system is at, more awareness and have more say in it.